Right, my name is Cornelius. I'm from MACOMI, and we are part of the Pioneers project. Pioneers project is a big EU Horizon 2020 project. You all know those projects. The Port of Antwerp is also part of the Pioneers project, and we have made a digital twin for the Port of Antwerp to look at all their port operations. I will not tell too much about digital twins because I learned already so much today, but I hope for all the visitors from abroad after this small presentation that you have a little bit better understanding of how nice the Port of Antwerp is and all the challenges that they are facing. And for all the people from Antwerp, you probably know this, just stick in, it's only 10 minutes. Pioneers is a EU-funded project, and it's basically, it has got lots of objectives, but what is it about? It is about designing the ports of the future. And that's, of course, for Antwerp, one of the biggest ports in Europe, second place just after Rotterdam. It's a very important thing. So some of the challenges that they are facing. First of all, there will be a lot of new terminals over here, and international trade is still going, and all goods are still mostly transported by vessel from China to Europe. More new terminals means also more vessels, the nautical access of Antwerp, and especially the bigger vessels with all the tight restrictions that you have over here. Bigger vessels also means that you will have more loads on the hinterland connections, big container vessels, more containers arriving in Antwerp. The sea vessels becoming bigger and bigger, but you also need to move the containers to Germany, Poland, Italy, and things like that. So, and the rail and roads, we know that those are already congested. Traffic jams on the road, we all know them because we are always standing in them and we're standing still and we're always annoyed at the traffic jams, but the railroads are also congested. And barges, that's also an issue. In summer, when there are periods of droughts, there's too little water, so the barges cannot go. And in winter, there's too much water or there are floodings, and then the barges can also not go. Maintenance, I think the presenter from TNO already mentioned that a little bit. In Europe, it's not only in Belgium, it's also in Rotterdam and everywhere. We are far behind on maintenance, and maintenance costs are increasing and increasing, especially in the last year. Maintenance is also, it has an impact on your operations. If you take a terminal or a rail line out of operation, that hinders you in your day-to-day operation. And of course, there's also quite a lot of environmental pressure. What's important to the ports? It's the high costs. In Rotterdam, there will be built a new terminal from APM Terminals. It's one terminal out of 5, and that's already costing over 1.1 billion euros. That's one terminal, and then you have 5. So the investments are huge. The complexity, it's not as easy as, okay, a vessel comes from China, goes to Antwerp, loads and unloads goods, and then goes back to China. No, there are many, many things involved in that, and I will show you that later. And also, if you're talking about ports, and that was a little bit the same example again of a TNO presenter, when they were building that bridge, that was built in the 80s, and it is still functioning. You need to make decisions at this moment for your design that's going to last for 50 years, and that's, of course, extremely difficult. Especially given this example, the larger vessels. Here you can see the first container vessel that was in 1956 and that carried 58 containers. This is the newest, largest vessel for containers. It carries over 24,000 containers. It has not visited Antwerp yet because that will, of course, be presented very big in all the newspapers. But you see that's a huge increase. Just for comparison, in the 1950s, airplanes, the larger airplanes, could also carry 58 passengers because that was before the jumbo jet days. There are not many airplanes that can carry 24,000 passengers. So this is a huge thing. How is that possible? The vessels have become larger and larger, longer, wider, higher, so they can carry many, many more containers. Very good for shipping lines. Because if you look at this vessel here in 2012, and you compare it to the 2020 vessels now, the operational cost of carrying a single container from China to Europe have decreased by 60 to 70%. So for the shipping line, huge. For the client, big benefits. But for the ports, it's a huge challenge because you see the bigger vessels. Here you can see everything is so close and there's not much space. And if you just turn your head away and you look behind you at the Scheldt River, you can also see that it's not very wide. So those bigger vessels form for the port quite a challenge. However, what is the biggest challenge of those larger vessels? We need to have bigger quay cranes. The containers need to be picked off the vessel, be put on the vessels. You do that using a key crane. The vessels are higher, they're longer, so you need bigger cranes with a longer reach. And that, of course, for all the mechanical engineers means more steel, more dynamic loads on the key crane. And that's, of course, need to be transferred to the ground. So the key walls need to be much more sturdy. And that's at this moment, those are the biggest investments for ports, new key walls. Okay. Well, here, the nice thing that they're doing in Antwerp. Antwerp is now doing a project in which they want to increase the container capacity. Now they're roughly at 13 million TEU. They want to extend that to almost 20, so it's a 50% increasement. It's a huge challenge for them. To do that, they are going to build a new container terminal over here. It's called the Tweede Getijdentok, and they're going to redevelop a number of existing terminals. Here, for example, at the Europa Terminal, North Sea Terminal, they will add terrain, but also the quay walls will be demolished. And I just mentioned that's the most expensive infrastructure they have, and new quay walls with a better orientation for the vessels here on the river will be built. So huge projects, but that's just on the infrastructure side. What is going to happen in 10 years when this should be finished? So first of all, you've got bigger vessels. Bigger vessels need to arrive in the port of Antwerp. The port of Antwerp is a tight port. So big vessels, they have an arrival window and a departure window of only a couple of minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. Imagine a vessel coming from China. It has been sailing for 5 weeks, and then you have an access window of 3 minutes. That's a big challenge. Even more important, if the vessel has been loaded and unloaded in Antwerp and you need to depart, then you have the same time window. And if you miss the tide window, then you get stuck in the port, and hopefully the next tide window comes within 12 hours, or otherwise you even have to wait longer. And that's, of course, a huge impact for the shipping lines. Another challenge over here is the turning basin. Vessels arrive, and then they need to be rotated, and then they go out. And it's not as easy as with your car, you just make a U-turn. These are vessels of 400 meters long. They need to turn here at this location. You need to have tugboats for that. And of course, you can imagine if you have such a huge vessel with strong winds and you need to rotate over here, other traffic cannot pass. And it is quite a lengthy procedure. It takes up to 25, sometimes 30 minutes. And if you do that, you block the entire river for 30 minutes. And then another couple of things here in what is really important in Antwerp, those are the pilots. If you go to Antwerp, you first need to go to Dutch terrain. So you need to first have a Dutch pilot. Then here comes the Belgian pilots. And if you need to go to this side, then you need to have not only a pilot for the river, but you also need to have a pilot for the docks. So that's also quite a challenge for that. And you not only need a pilot, but you also need to have a tugboat. All these things brought together, I hope you can understand that this port, that's quite a challenge to make things work. But again, it's a very good port, so they do make things work. To help them in this project and to make the right decisions, we have developed a digital twin with them. And that is, it is one of the applications that Stefan, one of the earlier presenters of the port of Antwerp Bruges, has said that was part of the APICA project. Well, here you can see some pictures. So we have got full visualization. That's a little bit different from all the other visualizations I've seen today, because most of them are in 3D, but here we just use 2-dimensional drawings so you can see what's happening, and lots of KPIs on what is happening. The nice thing that we've made for Antwerp is actually we made a remote control of a DVD player. And there are 2 important buttons on a DVD player, and that is rewind if you have missed an important part. So if something has happened, we stop, we press rewind, then we can study it again on what has happened, and then hopefully do better the next time. But we can also push fast forward. So the operators of the system can look ahead a couple of hours. For example, a vessel coming from England is delayed for a couple of hours. What do we need to do? Do we need to call it and say, guys, speed up, or so that you can make the lock, or do they need to slow down, and things like that? And the other thing, we can also look at a couple of weeks or a couple of years, maybe a couple of weeks. We know that there will be a period of drought in a couple of weeks. So what do we need to do? So we press fast forward, look at the situation at that moment, and then make the decisions at this moment to prevent any issues. And I think all these things I already mentioned, but port operations are quite complex. So there is the tides, vessels coming in the port or leaving the port, but that's associated to the berth planning. This is how the vessels are being moored here at the quay wall. But you start with this, you interact with this, and then in Antwerp, you've got two sides of the river. So if you go to this lock and then you need to go to the other side, you've got two locks. So there are quite a lot of interacting things with each other. To do this, we have got quite a lot of AI techniques that we're using into this platform. And one of them, for example, that is shown over here, we make predictions of how vessels behave. So we have analyzed all the data that we could get for all vessels in the port for the last 10 years. We use neural networks to analyze that. And here you can see, well, there is an actual, that's the green lines. That is how the vessel acted in reality. And the blue one was our predictions based on neural network techniques. So this is a little bit what we are doing here in the port of Antwerp using digital twins. And yeah, I would suggest turn around and take a look at the port. You can see it a little bit from there, but it's really a nice place.